Everyone, and start that. This will be recorded as usual. I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for attending. Thank you for coming tonight. Your time is very important, and we're glad that you chose to share it with us. Tonight, we'll be having an exciting and educational discussion on the use of cameras to improve street safety. The goal being to help everyone reach a better understanding of the use of cameras and if or how they can be useful to the bicycling community and, more importantly, the larger community as a whole that we are a part of. We're really excited to have this discussion. I want to start off by just adding some ground rules. I want to make sure that everyone is respectful of each other and is embracing to new ideas and thoughts. And when we break out into the breakout rooms, just wanted to present this idea to you. Think about who you are as a person and how you occupy space. If you're someone that talks a lot, that's great. If you're someone who doesn't talk a lot, that's great. I want you to be the opposite person today. So if you talk a lot, try to pretend you're someone that doesn't talk a lot today, and just try to switch roles to give space for those that aren't as comfortable speaking up. So in regards to our topic, you may have some opinions on the topic, which is great. And for others, we are mindful that this is a very sensitive topic. These views are both needed as part of the discussion, and it means that we've done a great job ensuring that everyone has been invited to the table if we have folks that are on both sides of the topic. I want to frame tonight's discussion to ensure that we cultivate an attitude of discovery and curiosity. You have to remember, we don't know what we don't know, right? So let's try to learn as much as possible about all the points of views that will be presented tonight. Pretend that you don't know anything and prepare yourself to learn something new from each speaker. In addition, prepare yourself to acknowledge what the speaker is saying. So acknowledge means showing that you've heard and you understand. So if you can try to challenge yourself to grasp and understand the content of the presentations so well that you could actually pitch the speaker's presentation for them, right? So that's a real deep level of just listening, and for listening for the sake of understanding. And whether you support using cameras for traffic enforcement or not, a better understanding of this topic will provide you all with the foundation to have a very constructive conversation around this topic within our community. And that's what our goal is, just to educate you and present all the information so that you're just better and well informed. When you go out, you can I know about everything. I came to the forum and I know more than when I came initially. And with that being said, I'm going to hand this over to Andrew, who is going to introduce you to our wonderful panelists that we have tonight.
Thank you very much, Diana. Yes, I have a slightly alternative viewpoint I just want to add, which is I think that we're all on the same side. I think we all may have slightly different ways of getting there, but fundamentally we're all on the same side. We want to ride our bikes safely. So to frame things up a bit, you all know we who love riding bikes are extremely vulnerable road users. We will always lose it when it comes to bike versus car. So what do? Well, having a police officer on every corner is a little bit unrealistic, costs a lot of taxpayer dollars, and has negative implications on certain demographics. We also know that design solutions like restriping the roads differently and slowing down drivers are one of the best ways to improve safety, but those changes take years to implement and sadly are irrelevant to those that are simply determined to be reckless drivers. So what do we do now, today, to make sure that we're safe? Many folks have started focusing on things like automated speed safety cameras and other forms of surveillance. And while those solutions make sense on the face of it, there are implications on the collection of data, privacy, and more that has caused us to host a forum like this. So that we can better understand the pros and cons of using cameras to improve the safety of people who ride bikes. In order to do that, we have three guests here tonight that I'll quickly introduce briefly before giving their biographies before each has a turn to speak. We've got Craig Davis, the founder of Cyclist Video Evidence. We've invited Craig here because he understands concerns around privacy and has developed a tool for crowdsourcing information from all the helmet cameras many of us wear when we ride our bikes. It's a different approach that could address some of the equity implications of traditional forms of surveillance, and we're hoping to use this example as a better way of understanding how and if we can develop ways of making the streets more safe outside of traditional forms of law enforcement. We have Lieutenant Steve Donohue, who is with the San Jose Police Department, and his role is to help us understand what law enforcement officers can and cannot do when it comes to cameras. We also hope with the dialogue today and the ideas that come up that he can help us better understand how law enforcement views these ideas and whether or not they could have merit. And lastly, we have Yolanda Davis from beautiful Southern California, who tends to be not supportive of camera surveillance. We're so grateful Yolanda is able to join us and help us in the bike movement better understand the lived experience of folks who are wary of the use of cameras. We're looking forward to her being able to highlight issues that we in the bike safety movement should be aware of as we go about dreaming up solutions that rely on cameras to improve street safety. So our first speaker, as I mentioned, is Craig Davis, and Craig is the founder of CyclistVideoEvidence.com. Craig has worked tirelessly at the local, state, and national level on improving cyclist safety through the use of video evidence and enforcement of existing laws intended to protect cyclists, such as reckless driving, assault, and the 3-foot laws that are in place. Craig has worked with state legislators on cycling safety legislation and served as Cyclist Video Evidence members advocate for legal precedent-setting cases. He also created CVE's free incident management system for cyclists and helped create CHP's 3-foot warning letter as the best non-punitive educational tool to educate and change dangerous driver behavior to prevent collisions. Beyond cycling advocacy, Craig is a software technologist and is the founder of the Youth Digital Arts Cyber School, which has taught the digital arts to thousands of third graders through high school students for over 20 years. Craig has been a speaker on computer technology and digital art at many educational conferences as well. So take it away, Craig. You got to get off mute first.
Yeah, so Sanja, do you need to share something for me to share the screen, or do I just click the share screen?
Yeah, you can just click the share screen button.
Okay. Let me know if you see it. Do you see? You do see it? Okay.
We see it, yes.
So I'm going to talk about using cyclist video evidence to create safe shared streets. Thank you to SVBC for asking me to speak. Let me get this thing out of my way here. I have 10 minutes to speak, so I'm going to have to speed through this presentation. It's all right, so the message just got in the way. It's good that this is being recorded. I apologize for speeding. Cyclist video evidence is not surveillance. A vehicle traveling at 50 miles per hour can cover a football field in about 33 seconds. Near-miss incidents that endanger cyclists' lives occur in a few seconds. They only capture a specific driver causing a specific crime at a specific time and place. Video cameras record at 30 to 60 frames per second. We have to analyze and share sub-second frames for law enforcement to viscerally comprehend the threat and terror cyclists experience from criminal near-miss incidents. We are staunch privacy advocates. We are against persistent surveillance, which captures everyone and every object all the time. Persistent surveillance uses invasive biometric technologies such as facial recognition and gait analysis, which are notoriously inaccurate and have been weaponized against communities. Persistent surveillance treats everyone as potential suspects before a crime occurs. It collects and stores massive amounts of data for indefinite periods of time, and law enforcement fuses every data source it can into fusion centers for total awareness. Our 5 pillars are critical to understand. Equal protection under the law for all cyclists. Existing laws must be enforced for cyclist safety. Laws must never be weaponized against any community. Traffic violence must be treated as seriously as domestic violence or gun violence. And collisions can be prevented by changing dangerous drivers' behavior before collisions occur. I recently wrote an article that's titled, "Riding a Bike on the Road is Like Riding a Bike in the Shooting Range," which quotes CHP's Redwood City commander in a statement to one of our members. The article begins by sharing devastating and recurring tragedies repeatedly suffered by the cycling community. You've seen all these kinds of images. I'm sure all of you have. They're just absolutely horrible, but it's critical that people see these things. Otherwise, they just don't understand. It then profiles a case where an Amazon delivery truck killed Joy Covey. Joy was Amazon's first CFO and the key to Amazon's initial IPO when Bezos desperately needed funding for Amazon to survive. CHP and San Mateo County DAs refused to charge the driver with anything based on the speculative opinions of two random passersby. However, insurance companies paid out $4.5 million to Joy's surviving 8-year-old son. San Bruno PD and the same San Mateo County DA refused to charge a driver who hit our member Glenn Kirby in a hit and run, leaving the scene, denying the right of way and reckless driving incident. Ironically, they refused to interview any of the witnesses involved in the assault and battery. So criminal near misses. This is an example of a criminal near miss. When you see it, you know it. This guy was intentionally targeting this cyclist, and you can see him staring down the cyclist. This is assault. These are more criminal near misses. That rear of that trailer came within a hair of killing this cyclist. This is on San Bruno. This is Glenn Kirby's case, where this truck driver threaded the needle between Glenn and a postal truck next to him and hit Glenn in the shoulder with this passenger side mirror. This is another case where a cattle trailer almost killed the cyclist on the road. And this is the cattle trailer going by. And this is another criminal near miss incident where the passenger side mirror almost hit the guy in the head. Happens all the time. And this is another one where this driver was screaming at the cyclist and endangering everyone on the road, including oncoming traffic. Our mission is to increase the number of cyclists who feel safe and confident riding on the roads. Prevent collisions, serious injuries, and death by changing dangerous drivers' behavior before collisions occur. Dangerous drivers' behavior can be changed by cyclists riding with a camera and submitting all criminal near miss incident reports to law enforcement and to our free incident management system. But law enforcement must enforce existing laws to hold dangerous drivers accountable for criminal near miss incidents. That means assault and reckless driving. Over our 9 years working across California, law enforcement has consistently rejected cyclist criminal near miss incident reports, even with video evidence. There is a persistent anti-cyclist bias across law enforcement and the legal system that enables dangerous drivers to drive with a sense of impunity. However, our best outcome, we are not anti-law enforcement. We are not anti-police. Our best outcome would be to promote San Mateo County and Santa Clara County as having best practices for enforcing existing laws for cyclist safety. The use of video evidence for cycling safety. Video evidence is the evidentiary gold standard. Cyclist video evidence is the best possible evidence to launch an investigation. Positive identification of the driver is not required to launch an investigation. And this was stated by Paul Hora during one of our town halls in Alameda County. And I won't read this because I'm short on time, but he has that statement. It's on our website and we'll share the link. On view is something else that law enforcement often says they have to do, which is a pre-video evidence concept of law enforcement having to personally witness every incident. But it doesn't make any sense because smartphone video has been used across the country for over a decade to launch investigations, store camera video. Law enforcement actively requests Ring and other private residence video and social media videos used every day. Erroneous rejections of cyclist incident reports. Cyclists are not required to weave in and out of traffic and park cars, even though we've been told by law enforcement we need to. Collisions are not required for assault and reckless driving. Cyclists can take the full lane if their safety requires it. Cyclists are not required to stay in the bike lane if it's not safe to do so. Cyclists are not required to stay at the farthest right-hand side of the road if it's not safe to do so. Reckless driving does not require intent. The California jury instructions state it's not required. Reckless driving can either be intentional or unintentional. Collisions are not always unintentional, even though the officer's training manual says they are. DAs often say that they reject incident reports because they must convince a jury of 12 beyond a reasonable doubt. Yet an incredibly small percent of cases ever go to jury trial. DAs need to step up and bring these cases, just like the brave DAs that brought groundbreaking domestic violence cases in the past. Assault and reckless driving convictions result in life-destroying prison sentences. Our Glendale precedent proves this is wrong. In the Glendale assault, the driver got a $300 fine, 50 hours of community service, and the judge erased his record upon request. Critical questions. The National Highway Transportation Safety Association published an article called The Role of Law Enforcement in Supporting Pedestrian and Bicyclist Safety, an idea book. In there they state, in many states, basic law enforcement training is approximately 16 weeks. About a week may be devoted to motor vehicle law and traffic crash investigation, and within that, many officers are fortunate to get even an hour of training time focused on pedestrian and bicyclist laws or issues. Collisions are the worst possible lagging indicator, and yet they are the only data collected by law enforcement to determine threats cyclists face. They represent the catastrophic failure of all cycling safety measures implemented at the time of the collisions. And according to Federal Highway Administration research, up to 60% of cyclists who end up in the emergency room do not report their collisions because they don't believe law enforcement will do anything. Criminal near misses are much higher resolution and accurate threat level data, and they are orders of magnitude more frequent and underreported than collisions and injuries. Performance metrics. How many criminal near misses were reported in the jurisdiction? How many criminal near miss cases were accepted, rejected, cited, charged, dismissed, prosecuted, and sentenced? How many 3-foot violations were accepted or rejected? How do cyclists who submitted incident reports feel their incidents were handled? Has the number of cyclist incident reports increased? Is the cycling population increasing? And do cyclists feel safer or more confident riding on the county roads? The 6 commitments for cycling safety are what the county, Santa Clara and San Mateo County, need to commit to. Provide jurisdiction-wide training about the near miss spectrum, the impact of near misses and perceived risk, and secure leadership input and support for this serious injury and fatality prevention program. Investigate all reported incident reports of motor vehicle, bicycle collisions, and criminal near misses with the same priority as any other case of assault with a deadly weapon. Creation of an independent review of complaints to ensure consistent and equal enforcement of existing laws for cycling safety. Actively encourage cyclists to ride with a camera and submit all near miss incident reports to prevent collisions by changing drivers' behavior before collisions occur, identify repeat offenders, and generate accurate and objective cyclist threat level data. Send 3-foot warning letters to drivers when cyclists report being endangered by 3-foot violations. And lastly, provide transparent and publicly accessible collision, criminal near miss, and 3-foot violation reporting for all incidents reported by cyclists. The cycling population will only increase when cyclists have the confidence to ride on the roads, and we can do this together. Please join us, cyclistvideoevidence.com.
Great, thank you very much, Craig.
I'm not sure how to stop sharing my screen. Let's see. Stop share, there we go, okay.
There we go, thank you very much, Craig. Our next speaker is Lieutenant Steve Donohue. He's been with the San Jose Police Department for 21 years. His current assignments are in patrolling through Metro, the street level narcotics administration, as well as in the sexual assault investigations, field training program, recruiting, and background units. Current duties include commander of the research and development unit, the COVID-19 response detail, community outreach team, and an academy instructor. And one interesting note, Steve went to the basic patrol bicycle school in 2002 and is now a certified instructor and became a certified instructor in 2005. Thank you very much for attending, Steve. We look forward to hearing from you. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. So I hate that I got to follow Craig. That was a fantastic presentation, and that's really not fair because I don't have anything like that. So nice to meet all of you. My name is Steve Donohue. I'm a lieutenant with the PD. And so I'll tell you a little bit about kind of why I'm here. I think most of us have questions about video surveillance and what role the government plays in video surveillance and then how we use it. So there's a few things I want to touch on that Craig brought up during his presentation that I think are kind of a gray area and where the public understands the parameters within which law enforcement can operate. in the chat, I put 2 links. One was for the California law of reckless driving, and the other is for the California law of assault. So I'm going to talk about an assault first. So an assault is an attempt coupled with a present ability to commit a violent injury upon the person of another. So if I'm driving my car and I see a bicyclist and I swerve toward that cyclist, I have created an attempt, which has a specific intent crime, coupled with the ability to hit them, and that would create a violent injury. Therefore, me aiming towards someone and trying to hit them is going to be an assault. It has to be an on purpose. It can't be an accident. It can't be I accidentally drifted into the bike lane. It can't be, I was not paying attention. I was messing with the radio. It actually has to be an on purpose to be an assault in and of itself. The other thing he mentioned, though, is reckless driving, and that doesn't have to be necessarily on purpose. That is driving with what's called wanton disregard for the safety of the public, and you'll see that in the link that I put into the chats. So wanton disregard means that it's not that I just don't care, it's that I really don't care about the safety of others. And there's no perfect definition of this. The courts have looked at it over the years, and it goes to show that there's no bright line rule on what reckless driving is. It could be something as simple as spinning your tires and drifting to the side. That's reckless driving. It could be something like I am on my phone and I just don't care about people and I'm driving around chit-chatting on my phone and not paying attention. I hit somebody. That's wanton disregard. But Craig was right when he said that it's not a specific intent crime. I don't have to have the intent to cause harm by my actions, but I do have to have the knowledge or the kind of wherewithal to recognize that what I'm doing is putting the danger in public, or the public in danger. Sorry, I flipped that around. So that's where the law comes into this, and it gets a little sticky. Craig also mentioned that the district attorney looks at whether or not a case is prosecutable, whether or not they can win it in the eyes of a jury. The district attorney's office is not just about prosecuting everything that comes to them. They can't. It's impossible. There are so many cases. I mean, imagine just our agency, we get 30,000 burglaries a year. So to be able to prosecute every case that comes before a district attorney is impossible. So what they look at is the totality of the circumstances, jury appeal, how they're going to try and get this case across the goal line, how much time, energy, and effort it would take in comparison to the other events that are happening. And so the reason I mention this is not to make any excuses whatsoever, but I do want the members of the public to understand that there are circumstances beyond which that are in the control of law enforcement that make it so even if we can't do anything about it, there's a desire for us to help others, and there's a desire for us to really commit to making the public and the streets safer, especially for bicyclists. Now, I personally ride. I've been riding for many years. Like he said, I trained cops in how to ride bikes, and I know that sounds silly. Not all of you know what that means. So when I mentioned it earlier, some people laughed at me. I didn't it's not like they have training wheels. What it means is that we take them out and we teach them skills that most bikelists don't need. We teach them how to not just ride down a flight of stairs, but they have to ride up a flight of stairs. They have to learn how to navigate tight crowds. They have to be able to maneuver in hallways of buildings, be able to ride a bike down a hallway and make a 90-degree turn in only a 3-foot wide hallway on a bicycle that's 6-7 feet long. So we have to teach them all these things. And so that's what the bike school is about. So the reason I say all this is that I want you to know that I'm here, as we go through this forum, for any questions that pertain to law enforcement, how we use surveillance, how your videos can help us, how they can help you. But I also want you to be armed with the knowledge of kind of what it takes to be able to prosecute a crime and move forward with a case that's brought to us. So as we go through the forum, feel free to ask anything, and then we'll see where it leads us. That's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Donohue. All right. Last but not least, Yolanda Davis Overstreet. She's a graduate of urban sustainability the master's program at Antioch University, and her community service work and consulting fall in the areas of community organizing and mobility justice with a focus on pedestrian safety in communities of color. She is the founder of Ride in Living Color, a bicycling and mobility justice advocacy initiative that was started in 2011 as a woman of color, mother, social and environmental activist, and recently trained in urban sustainability. One of the most vital lessons Yolanda has learned and activated in these transformative years of doing community service work is that not only does her narrative matter, but equally so the community narratives matter. Though through Yolanda's international community work, she has learned to take on the role of an adaptive leader through the process of continuous comparative and observational research, along with the actions of local and national relationship building. She believes it is imperative that our communities collectively shift into understanding and valuing the connection of how policy, wellness, education, and the criminal system, housing, climate, biodiversity, and equitable transportation play a vital role in the intersection of leading us into improved upon pedestrian safety, infrastructure, and wellness for our youth, families, and overall human sustainability. Take it away, Yolanda.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for having me here this evening. I am somewhat new to this platform of having these conversations. A lot of my work has been grassroots, right outside my door, observing really deeply over the past 10 years. That's turned it into not only work that now spans into the macro conversations, but also in terms of figuring out how we as community constituents play a role in this conversation, and the fact that we also need to be at more conversations that are taking place like this today. So I thank you. I'd also like to mention that last summer I was able and fortunate to get a mini grant from SCAG Go Human, where I created 2 short documentaries, and I think we're going to show one tonight briefly. One is 4 minutes, which is called Walk the Boulevard, and it focuses in on a neighborhood like the one that I grew up in that really launched me into the work that I'm doing, that was disenfranchised for roughly 6 decades plus due to the redlining, and also due to the fact of being a community of color. I think one of the things that we just need to, if some folks here tonight are not aware of, is that we have to look at basically, why fatalities and injuries and maybe not even a respect for bike riders exists within some of our communities of color. Number one, because we ourselves can't ride a bike. We ourselves cannot walk on a sidewalk in dignity, quite frankly, because the sidewalks are crumbling, the streets are crumbling, and in terms of being able to enjoy nature and outdoors, and the sport and/or commuting process of bicycling is very unfamiliar. So what's happened in this community of West Adams is, after 6 decades, and having just so happened to have a bike advocate that lived in this community, we intersected. And so my advocacy work then intersected with what LA Dot work was in terms of Vision Zero and Adams Boulevard, in this case being a high injury network. And now we have a community member that has been brought on board with a government agency to look at not only and have the conversations of this unsafe corridor, but to figure out how we can better communicate with community members about the need to change, finally, and make this a safer street. But then that also involves a lot of education and engagement. So before I go on any further, I'd like to see if we can show this 4-minute documentary, and then I will go into some thoughts.
Can you all see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
We can't hear it.
Eventually, to him, happened to give up the store. Minister of West Adams Church of Christ here at 4959 West Adams. had a young
You
man
may need to
come
stop sharing and start again with sharing sound. There's a little checkbox for sharing sound.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Definitely want to be able to hear it. Sonia's working on that. We'll get that up as soon as possible. I want to make
Yeah,
sure.
let's try this again.
Our next door neighbor, he ran a flower store. Crossing the road, he got hit and was out for over 6 months, leading eventually to him having to give up his store. I'm the minister of the West Adams Church of Christ here at 4959 West Adams Boulevard. We had a young man, he got hit right here, okay? First car hit, second car hit, and the third car, he ended up over in Crenshaw and Adams. Really, we have to be sensitive to the fact that people's lives matter.
We're here today at the Adams Boulevard Safety Project, Walk the Boulevard. We have a range of community allies and partners that are joining us today.
The reason we're working on Adams is that we've identified a pattern of crashes that are killing and severely injuring people along this street. And the pattern is one of the most significant that we see in the entire city.
We've literally witnessed families risking their lives to cross the street to go to school. The big complaint that we hear in our community is just folks having to go way out of their way just to cross the street to get to school.
The project that we've developed has really addressed these major issues. It will add 4 additional pedestrian crossings with some infrastructure that should serve to help facilitate a safe movement. We're also designing a project that's going to take the street down from 2 lanes in each direction, and when we are going to bring it down to 1 lane in each direction so that traffic is calmer, people are traveling more slowly. And we're also going to be adding, so loud. We're also going to be adding a bike lane with that extra space that's created through the lane reconfiguration.
People were actually focused on the community for once, and at a level to where it really connects with everyday people. This is really about you. This is about the safety of your community and the safety for you. And so tying that all together just made it all the more meaningful.
And more of us, more African Americans coming out, more people of color coming out and being vocal.
Thank you. Thank you. So that I wanted to show that because I think that's really the platform that I come from. We really have to do much more, not only infrastructure improvement, we have to engage in major education and engagement, which is not taking place on the level that it should be in many of our communities of color in California and quite frankly, the United States. So my idea of using surveillance cameras would be if LA DOT and or ambassadors that such as myself and other community leaders were involved in when we do get bike lanes and when we do get improved infrastructure, that we and our team will be responsible for monitoring, because we can't just make that change and then go on about our day. We literally have to take a year to 2 years to assist and kind of hold this transition that takes place in our communities, because they have been disenfranchised for so long, and also the use of surveillance and policing in communities of color is an issue in itself in terms of policy work that needs to be done, which is a kind of a whole nother conversation we can have on that I don't believe that surveillance cameras will address a lot of the issues that exist at that intersection of safety. In terms of surveillance cameras for Black Lives on Bikes, in particular, I just finished also a short documentary where Black lives and brown lives are in fact harassed when riding bikes and asked, are those bikes yours, by enforcement. Black lives are jailed for riding and walking. They are cited. And these are misuses in some cases of surveillance that we, and just on another topic, need to address those before we talk about having speed cameras or any other types of surveillance cameras. And so that's really my platform. We have a lot of work to do in terms of policy and education and engagement. And I am doing that here in Los Angeles with LA DOT, where we're doing events like for this particular bike lane, a community slow roll where we celebrated the bike lanes, and we literally rode within the bike lane. So both the bicyclists would know that these lanes are for you, and also for the motorists to see that we are intentionally working to stay within our lane, and that they too should work to stay within their lane. We also have bollards that are being put up as a pilot program to see how they work in terms of gauging motorists, again, in this resistance and in this moment of change, to see how motorists can, again, stay within their lanes, slow down, adjust their schedules. And these are all information pieces that actually LA DOT and as community members and advocates, we are working from both platforms. So I don't think there's just one approach in terms of how we solve these most deadly issues, because we have had hit and runs on our boulevard. And in fact, we're having a memorial walk that I've organized, will take place this coming Saturday, where we will literally walk the boulevard and recognize the lives, and to bring attention to make our roads more of a human conversation as opposed to mechanical or structural. And so that's the work that we're doing here in West Adams, and it's a lot of work that we need to follow through. And I would say the key solution, a couple key solutions that I see that are actually happening, is that we have agencies like our departments of transportation to hire community advocates to come on board, and to basically that we'll be able to sit down together at the table from an engineering and planning perspective to a grassroots perspective of connecting with principals, connecting with churches, connecting with schools, having community gatherings, and to make really our communities more human in terms of the speeding and just really where folks are more concerned with getting from point A to point B and aren't really recognizing that lives have been lost on our boulevards. So I would just personally say it has been rewarding to have this experience working with LA DOT. And I'm very much encouraging that they go from community to community, especially in our communities of color, to make this same process happen there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yolanda. That was a very eye-opening video that you provided, and wish you the best of luck in trying to make West Adams a little bit safer, given the car culture down in Los Angeles. So I know a lot has changed since I grew up there, and it's really good to see that there's at least a recognition that there's more people that belong on the streets besides just automobiles. So, or more things that belong on the street.
Very much so.
So thank you to all three panelists. I think we've got some time for some questions. I think that people have been populating the chat room with questions. So we'll start off with, I guess, one of the easiest ones based on our title, which is, how do you define surveillance? Maybe we should let Lieutenant Donohue take a first stab at that. I think Craig mentioned it as well, but go ahead, Lieutenant Donohue.
Yeah, I actually wrote down what Craig said because it was pretty detailed. So for us, right, I'm obviously a representative of the government. So surveillance is a little different when you talk from my perspective as Steve Donohue versus my perspective as a law enforcement officer representing the government. So for our agency, we have we have traffic cameras that are up at the intersections that we can see live feeds of what's happening. Now that's video surveillance, right? We're watching the public. That's what that is. Traffic cameras are not stored. We don't store those, but we did I think we are installing 4 new cameras at Tully and Monterey, or Tully and Kirtner, because of all the fatalities we've had in the area. So we're putting in 4 cameras there for surveillance, and that was at the city council's directive, not the police departments. But so I think surveillance, when representing the government, is the government's watching of the people, right? I think that's the kind of the easiest way to say it. Now, for me, Steve Donohue, the normal guy who lives in a town, I have cameras on the front of my house, and they kind of watch my stuff, so that if something were to happen to my stuff, I'd have video recordings of the people that did that thing to my stuff, right? So I think that's the way most general public views surveillance. They're looking at something and keeping a recording of it. When we talk about bicycle safety, it's a little bit different. So something Craig mentioned is you have video cameras on bikes. You can have GoPros. You can actually have recordings of your rides and the things you've experienced. Now, you're in public. You're a private person. You're not a representative of the government. You're storing it for your own purposes. You're not using it, like he said, for any kind of biometrics or facial recognition, which, by the way, we don't use biometrics or facial recognition or gait recognition. That's some pretty high-tech stuff. We don't have all that. But when you're talking about from the private person's perspective, that kind of surveillance is also surveillance. It's watching other people, because you're not just capturing you, you're capturing other people, their cars, their license plates, their comings and goings, their actions. So I think all of it is surveillance. You're muted. Sorry.
Let me take a stab. So, as I said, we are staunch privacy advocates, and we are anti-persistent surveillance. What I tried to explain is that a vehicle going 50 miles an hour can cover a football field in about 3 seconds. And so when we're talking about an incident going by a cyclist, that's maybe 3 seconds, and probably less. And so we are actually, video cameras that cyclists ride with can record at 30 to 60 frames per second. So we're actually looking at sub-second frames. And the only time an incident report occurs with cyclist video evidence, is when a cyclist was endangered. And specifically, we focus on criminal near misses, which are assault and reckless driving. 3-foot violations are subjective, and so for that, we recommend sending a 3-foot warning letter that we helped CHP create, a hand sign warning letter, because that's the best non-punitive educational tool possible. So our video evidence is not surveillance. It's about a 3-second incident that occurs that endangers the life of a cyclist. And that if we can get those laws enforced about assault and reckless driving, we can change the behavior of those drivers before they kill someone or before they have a horrible collision. Even sending out those warning letters changes drivers' behavior. If they get a letter from Steve saying that San Jose PD takes cycling safety seriously, and a cyclist called and said they were endangered by this driver at this date and time with this license plate number, and then they send out a hand sign warning letter, they take notice. Even that is fantastic. That's a best practice. So there's a huge, massive gulf between video evidence, cyclist video evidence, and surveillance. These are 2 completely different topics that frankly need their own forums to discuss these, I think.
Okay, before I let Yolanda speak, I'm going to add to the original question of defining surveillance as, would members of your community feel that cameras discussed by Craig, that is ones mounted on a bicycle, constitute surveillance for you?
Sorry, was that a question to me? Is that what you said?
Oh, no, for Yolanda.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I
Yeah,
thought that
sure,
was
not
for
a problem.
Craig. Okay.
Sure. No, I was changing it up a little bit.
Okay.
So in addition to defining surveillance, how would your members of your community feel that cameras, as discussed by Craig, that is, the ones mounted on bicycles for a short period, would that constitute surveillance for members of your community?
I think that's a good question. I think, first off, how much would something like that cost, Craig? I guess that's the first question. And how would you plan to share this and get this information out to the community? These are just questions that come up just from a standpoint of education. I think all of the elements that we're speaking are for a community like West Adams, a community of color, is creating those platforms of trust, number one. And then how we'll have those conversations because of the historical to current day activities that are taking place for the safety of Brown and Black lives. And I do know that we have probably folks that already do have these mounted cameras on their bike. They have shared this information on social media platforms. This information is circulating within our community. I have shared actually some of it with my LA.dot team members. But as a whole, I think what we're looking at here is, number one, that we're really trying to get more Black and Brown lives on bikes. We're trying to get more Black and Brown lives to use public transit, to walk, and to be able to feel safe. So I think we're really like, while we're all human lives, our realities differ in terms of where the safety issues are. And I do believe that we do have reckless drivers that still exist and will continue to exist. So yes, the question is, either way, how are we going to save lives? That's the reason that Adams Boulevard changed, is because we are a high injury network. So basically that means that we have had hit and runs, and lives have been taken, and lives have been harmed. So I believe that we need to first start having bring this conversation and set up platforms where we can have more community conversations about cameras being mounted on our bikes, that possibly there's something that can be offered with our bikes so that our teens or our young lives can feel safe riding on bikes. I think it's also just the idea of utilizing these devices. So there definitely is an information kind of utilization gap that exists here. And I know this also leads to the whole conversation of the more lives we can get on bikes, the better chance of us addressing some of our climate crisis issues as well. So it all overlaps. And that would just be my response today.
Okay.
Andrew, can I respond to two questions that Yolanda asked?
Sure, if you do that very quickly.
Quickly is, you asked about cost. And so some of the people that are attending this meeting right now are some of our members, and they pay $25 for a high resolution camera that they've been using, and it works very well for them. So cost, we are very sensitive to, and there are high resolution cameras that they've been riding with. And these are, they could buy GoPros, but they're way overpriced. And frankly, they're no better than these 4K cameras. The other question was about sharing information. And the reason we created a free incident management system is because when you submit an incident to law enforcement, they only track collisions. And once you submit it to them, you have no public access. So you can't have a historical analysis of the incidents that you've had. And you can't search for repeat offenders to create a pattern of behavior for dangerous drivers. So our system is in parallel with law enforcement. Law enforcement enforces the law, and they have internal systems that they use. We have no access to that. And so one of the biggest outcomes of these criminal near miss incidents is that we can also generate near miss incident data that I said was much higher resolution and much more accurate to document the actual threat levels that cyclists face, near misses, before collisions occur, and then use that to identify high threat level networks. So the incident management system is really key to that as well.
Okay, thank you, Greg.
Okay, let's pivot a little bit. This question is for Lieutenant Donohue. Cyclist video evidence has many examples of cyclists being endangered, and in 100% of the cases, San Mateo County and local law enforcement in San Mateo County have not investigated. That is the extent of law enforcement supporting cyclists in San Mateo County. We know you are from San Jose PD, but do you have any comments regarding that?
I will not comment.
I'm just reading the question.
Are you kidding me? Yeah, no, San Mateo County is a totally different agency, and I don't know the details of those events. There's too many questions for me to be able to answer that, right? I would have to know what the details are in the events. What were the outcomes? You know, we don't work with San Mateo County district attorneys or their investigators. I have no idea, so I can't comment to that. I'm sorry.
All right. Next question. Since there's now the list of questions grows exponentially as time draws to the end. Let's see. The next one that just got added to that list. Can't the police compel private citizens for this footage through a warrant?
So police can compel warrants. We can use warrants to gather evidence in the event of a crime. Has a crime been committed? And if so, do we have probable cause to believe that the evidence of this crime is at this location or can be obtained by that warrant? And if we can prove that to a magistrate or a judge, then we are able to obtain a warrant and then can use that to gather the evidence. I will tell you that we typically don't run into this issue. Most people are willing to give up their residential video footage if there's an accident that occurs in front of their house and somebody gets hurt. They tend to give it to us. I mean, we ask nicely, and you know, most people are good people and they want to help others. So yeah, we don't usually run into this problem.
Okay. Next question, as Officer Donohue and Craig have both acknowledged, video surveillance and bicycle cameras are different systems, but the evidentiary value should be the same. If there is not the capacity by law enforcement to take most of these cases to trial, it seems like there needs to be another method to cite and call into account this aggressive and reckless behavior towards cyclists. Any thoughts and comments?
I'll jump on this one, Craig, and I think you're going to agree with me. Somebody put into the comments actually about Sunnyvale's ordinance. So yes. Sunnyvale came up and passed the ordinance saying that it's a violation of their municipal code to harass a cyclist, and they define what that means in their Muni code. And then that allows the victim, if you will, I'm going to use that term not in the legal sense, but the person that's bringing suit, to actually go civilly after the person that harassed them, according to the definition of harassment in that code. So it gives them civil recourse to be able to do something about it, and that is recourse absent law enforcement. So it puts the power into the people's hands to be able to go after someone that did this to them. So
what you're summarizing is that there are if laws are set up for civil avenues to pursue, then it could be pursued as a civil and not necessarily a criminal matter.
Yeah, that's an example of a secondary recourse that's absent law enforcement. Now, we've all heard of private person's arrest, right? In the past, it used to be called citizen's arrest. We don't use that term anymore for obvious reasons. However, this is not a good idea for this kind of case. This is a terrible option. It creates an environment that's adversarial between two individuals in the community with equal rights and equal ability to get angry at each other. And then we don't want that. So
and if a driver has already harassed you and threatened your life, the last thing you want to do is go and chase that driver down, get in front of him and start yelling at that driver, why did you do this? That is the dumbest thing you could possibly do. So we absolutely do not recommend private person arrest citations. We've gone through this 10 years ago. And so I want to add on, though, to what Lieutenant Donohue said, that what we challenge DAs to is, first off, if you look on San Mateo County DA's website, they state a very small percentage. So we're talking probably less than 5% of cases ever go to jury trial. That means 95% don't. They're settled out of court. They're plea deals. And so in domestic violence cases, domestic violence law in the beginning, you know, the initial cases were, you know, just don't piss off your husband. Were dismissed out of hand, and the cases weren't brought. And that's a really good analogy for what's happening with cyclists and cyclists assault and reckless driving. They say, well, you know, we can't convince a jury of 12. Well, if 95% of cases are settled out of court, why are we using that standard instead of making new case law, bringing these cases up, and just like they had to do with domestic violence in the past? So we think DAs really need to recognize the uniqueness of assault and reckless driving against cyclists. I mean, I showed you the images of cyclists getting mowed down and plowed over. And, you know, for these criminal near miss violations, within inches, within a foot, one twitch, and those cyclists are dead. So they have to take this as seriously as domestic violence and gun violence. This is great bodily, a threat of great bodily injury with a deadly weapon moving at speed, multi-thousand-pound vehicle. And, you know, I feel like Steve is, you know, very thoughtful about this, and I have no doubt we can work together, you know, on these issues. But I think, as he said, he's on one side, and there's a lot that of prior organizational experience that is brought into this, and yet he's open, and I think we can build a bridge, because we need new case law. We need DAs that are willing to step up and be brave and bring these cases.
Okay, Yolanda, you have your hand up, so you sound like you have, or you look like you have something to say.
Yes. Thank you, Steve and Greg, for sharing this. I can't help but think, as you speak on these issues of safety, that we can actually take a drone and hone down into what's happening in our communities of color in particular. We're not there yet. We're not at the point of being able to specifically look at cyclists and these terrible incidents that are happening. Rightly so. We just had a cyclist that was killed in Griffith Park. They were training for the AIDS ride, which I did years ago, and a reckless, careless, horrible, quite frankly, you know, person would run down another human being. But I can't help but think of the work that we could collectively do if we look at, as we speak of DAs, as we speak of our system as it deals with transportation, that we also look at communities that are suffering and have been, and people that are suffering because our communities are not up to par. Our infrastructure is not up to par. So we can't have this conversation that you're having until we first improve our roadways and our byways, so that we can educate a massive group of people in terms of, and also create safe places to move around and bicycle. So I believe that we really need to, from a policy perspective, from our departments of transportation, make it a priority to first off, improve our communities of color that are crumbling, quite frankly, and that we take this knowledge that is being shared today, and we figure out how, from safe routes to school, to our commuters, to metro, to public transportation, public transit, that we basically, you know, we take a step further than what we're doing here today, which is to make sure that Black lives that are the highest number of folks that are being killed in communities, and they have to be prioritized, Black and brown lives. And then we can talk about all the tools and gadgets that we can use to better improve for those folks that just don't care, that are behind the wheel. So I really think that this conversation definitely needs to have a racial equity lens on it. And we have a lot of professionals that are out there. You know, I'm just a mom that decided that I was going to step up and advocate for my daughter, and therefore the 300 kids that were at her middle school to get to where I am today. And I think if we can encourage more moms and more community leaders to come on board and to be able to hear the conversations that are taking place today, I think that in itself would improve the safety of cyclists, of pedestrians, of our elders, and for our children.
Okay, I want to be mindful of everyone's time, and I want to thank each of the panelists, Craig Davis, Lieutenant Steve Donohue, and Yolanda Davis Overstreet one more time. Sadly, you're not going to hear a lot of applause. Maybe everyone can click the applause reaction or something like that. You guys did a wonderful job in sharing your insights. In fact, we have a number of remaining questions, and I was hoping that we could email these questions to the panelists for your thoughts on them, and then we could post them on the SVDC, or at least send them out to the participants that are in this session here. Would the panelists be open to sort of answering the remaining questions over email?
Sure.
Sure, I can also stick around if you guys need more time.
Well, we're going to have to move on to the next portion of our meeting, which are the local team meetings. So we're going to let you off the hook, Mr. Donohue, Lieutenant Donohue, but you've been fantastic.
Yeah, great to meet you, Steve and Yolanda.
You too. Nice to meet you.
Thank you all very much.
Nice to meet you both, and you all. Okay, thanks.
All right, and I'm going to turn it back over to Diana now. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thanks to all of our panelists. Thank you for this exciting discussion. The chat box was going off the hinge, so you did a great job.